Okay. Any questions about Evet. Ya. Tamam. Tamam. Okay. Any questions about perpetual peace or democratic peace? Are we all clear about the hypotheses and also the theoretical underpinnings? Everyone? We're approaching the exam. For that reason, if there's anything that you did not understand, anything that's unclear, make sure that you're going to ask them next week when I do the review session. As you know, there will be a review session. Okay? So make notes whenever you have questions. But the way that you should think about every topic that we cover in class is through questioning how there are different explanations of the same topic, okay? So when I say regime type, you should be able to look at regime type and how regime type affects the system from different IR perspectives, okay? You should at least be able to explain them from 2 different perspectives. I'm not ever going to ask you to explain something from 5 different perspectives, but at least 2, okay? A realist or liberal, constructivist or realist, that kind of explanations. Now, I looked at, in that yin-yang figure, let me actually show you that. Once again, with different colors for a change. Okay, in this figure, remember that I said there's the international economic system, and then there's the international political system, and then we're looking at the state in the middle, but also there are other actors than the state, than the nation state. But I said we will first focus on the state and then we will look at others. So far, I looked at the state and I looked at how extraction of resources, how military innovations and military revolution, and how state building processes have led to the nation state, and also why it was the nation state that survived in the international political and economic system as opposed to city leagues, city states, and empires. And then I said, if I go deeper into the state, let's look at how the society is affected from the evolution of the nation state. So we looked at minorities, women, and the worker classes' relationship with war. Now, so far, guys, I've talked a lot about war. There are a couple of reasons for that. Why do we always talk about war? Because wars in the international system have affected both political systems. I showed you sometimes wars led to democracies, sometimes to authoritarian states. Okay, remember Otto Hinsen and others. And wars have affected the economic system also of states. For that reason, I look at wars and the relationship between wars and the society, wars and the state, wars and the political and economic system as a whole. So in that sense, this course is about wars, okay? It's not a very direct relationship, but in many ways, wars are related to everything that we have done so far. That's why I kept emphasizing the consequences, intended and unintended consequences of war. Remember, for women's rights, there were many unintended consequences. The intended consequences are victory or not, but unintended consequences can be as important for the people and the states as intended ones. So in this yin-yang picture then, we have looked at different aspects of the state in relation to war and how that affects the economic system and the political system. This is the big picture of the course, okay? And at this point, I'm going to go deeper into the nation state, and I'm going to start looking at how ideas affect individuals within the state and how ideologies within the nation state affect the nation state, okay? So far, I've said several things like military revolution, conscription, having people die for you willingly. All these arguments will now be connected to the ideologies that we will be looking at. What do? Well, we will be looking at, I had to pick, there are several ideologies. I had to pick the ones that I thought are the most interesting or the most important. So today and next week, we will be looking at social Darwinism, militarism, and the cult of the offensive. Like I said, Stephen Van Evera is the guy to read. He actually talks about all of these, okay, in his article. And he's an expert on wars. So it's a very good idea to finish reading him by next week, and that will be included in the exam as well, the week after. And so the question then will become, I think I asked this question several times, but the question is, and I'll ask you, is war a good thing? Or is war a good thing? Sometimes. Never. Is war a good thing? Never. Is war a good thing? Sometimes. Yeah? If you're powerful and if you win the war, it is.
But still you spend so much time, population, and money and resources on it, which you could use them for other purposes.
Okay, so you're looking at this from a more rational perspective. How about you? Why is war never a good thing? You said, no, it's not a good thing, never. So why? Such as? Tell me one. What?
Lots of deaths.
Lots of people dying. Okay. What else? We talked about the destruction that wars cause, right? So let me ask you one more question. If I asked you this question, and if we were all in Germany by mid to late 1800s, what do you think the answer would be?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. The answer would be yes. War is actually a good thing. Now, why are there different opinions about war, on war, today in 2011 in Turkey? Yes.
When there's an economic crisis, if there's a war, it's a balance for changeable because.
Okay, so you're actually talking about what we said about economic crises and wars. Sometimes when you have economic crises, having a war might have a positive effect on the system. Okay, military industry. There are some sectors that will think that war is a good thing because of profits.
Some people woke up and saw the severe consequences of the war, so that they never prefer again.
Okay, severe consequences. What actually affects our opinions is probably, do you guys actually watch war movies a lot?
Yes.
Have you watched Platoon?
Yes.
Okay, so homework. Homework for next week. The university has it. It's very easy to find the movie. Your homework then is watch Platoon. if you haven't. Okay? Have you watched Kubrick movies such as The Red Thin Line?
Yes.
No?
Yes, yes. Vietnam.
Only like 2 people did? I don't want to give you too much homework, but I might, I might have to. Okay. If you haven't watched either Full Metal Jacket or Red Thin Line, okay? There are several movies that actually portray war as the worst crime against humanity. They're movies, these are movies that actually tell us the pains of war, and they're quite individual in the sense that there's one soldier that we're focusing on, and that 1 or 2 soldiers, by the end of the movie, we identify with, and we actually like those guys, and if one of them is killed, we feel, you know, sorry that that guy is felt. And we have actually, we grew up watching these war movies. And in most of these movies, well, I think the majority of these movies portray war as the most terrible thing. So we are kind of doctrinated to think that war is an extremely horrible thing, and it's unacceptable. I'm not criticizing that. I'm actually stating a fact. Okay, yes?
In the movie Letters to Iwo Jima, there were 2 army officers that were during the peacetime. They were eating in the same table, but during the wartime they shot each other.
Absolutely. That's actually a very good movie too. I think I watched probably all war movies, maybe not very recent ones, but all the ones that you should also watch. They're very interesting because, again, like I said, they shape your ideas about wars, what you think about wars. Okay? So Platoon is your homework, and if you can, if you don't have midterms until next week, if you're not too busy, try to watch either Red Thin Line or Full Metal Jacket. And see, I'm serious. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Next week, I actually want to ask you a couple of things about Platoon. Okay? I think I used the word we're kind of indoctrinated to think that war is not a good thing. Remember? But in the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, you know what? If you went to Germany or many other places in Europe or in the US, you would actually see that a lot of people thought that war is a good thing. War is a necessary thing. And the reason for that is because those people at those times are indoctrinated or socialized or led to think in different ways with different frameworks. Social Darwinism, militarism, and the cult of the offensive are 3 ideas that have become ideologies by mass subscriptions to these ideas by people and by states. Okay? So when an idea is something that just one individual believes in, it's not that powerful. But if I ask you, and I did last year actually in the class, I asked my students to initiate an ideology called nihilism, and then to organize it so that you think about ways of getting other people to believe in that ideology. Like, imagine when you go home today, until next week, think about how you would make the whole university nihilist. Is it? What is nihilism? Okay, so you would have to first come up with the rules or come up with the pillars, the main ideas of what nihilism will be. Okay? Or you can actually think of this as a movement. But to have a movement, you first need to have a very interesting idea. I have no idea what nihilism is. Okay? It could be anything. But because, you know, I think of myself as this incredibly wonderful person, I picked nihilism instead of anything else. So if I told you to organize this ideology or organize this idea, I have just brought an idea. I just actually threw an idea into this classroom. And this idea will come to your minds tomorrow when you're having lunch, and then at night while you're reading something. And then you'll keep thinking about the idea. And if someone gives you more information about the idea, then you're going to think more about that idea. And then, after a while, once you become a nihilist, okay, let's just assume that by the end of the semester, you're a perfect nihilist. You're completely subscribed to that idea. At that point, it will not be sufficient that you, only you, are a nihilist. You will want your best friend to be a nihilist too. You'll want your mom or dad. You will want your close friends. And then, after a while, your close friends will not be sufficient. You will want other people to believe in what you think is the truth. That's what makes ideas powerful, okay? When you believe that the idea that you have is the absolute truth, then you start thinking everyone should believe in it for their own good. And then the next step is going to spread the idea, and the next thing that you do is to actually have more and more people subscribing to the idea. And the next step is to actually rule with that idea. At that point, that little tiny idea that I threw in the class as nihilism becomes an ideology. And then the state gets ruled by nihilism. Okay? So think of this nihilism as whatever ideology. Okay? All these three ideologies then are such ideas, or were such ideas, and then they grew into ideologies because one person threw them in an environment, and then one person believed in it, then the mom, then the close friend, then other friends, and it spread. The first one is social Darwinism. And obviously, it is related to Darwinism, but it is not Darwinism. It's different. It's related, but different. So Charles Darwin, in 1859, publishes On the Origins of Species. Everybody is familiar with Darwin, right? So the main idea of Darwin is what? He looks at what?
Human evolution.
Not really. Hold on. He looks at living organisms, not necessarily humans. Okay? So he looks, his perspective is a biology perspective, isn't it? So he looks at organisms. What did you say? I actually missed. Evolution, okay, of living organisms. So it's not just humans, but for all living organisms, he believes that there is the system, life system that is, selects the fittest organism to survive. So whatever organism is the fittest to survive, then that will actually eventually survive. Okay, that will evolve. And whatever the hardships in the environment, it will adapt. We mentioned this when we were talking about Sprout. We were saying that just like, Darwin's theory on natural, on living organisms, Sprout believed that nation states adapted, learned, and survived. Okay? So from a Darwinist perspective, the most important idea is the system naturally selects the fittest to survive. Those that are not fit to survive are not supposed to live or are not supposed to survive. In other words, if you're weak, you'll be eliminated. Now, this whole idea is quite rational, okay? In the sense that you know, the nature is trying to maximize the gains and minimize the costs. And if you're a weak organism, then you're hurting the nature, so the nature eliminates you. I want you to think from a biological perspective here, okay? So if you actually are strong, then, you know, you will evolve as a strong organism. That's the idea. Now, I'll tell you how this completely biological theory turned into a social science thing. You know, Herbert Spencer and many others read Darwin and they started thinking of the society. How does the society evolve? How does, I'm not talking about the biology of human beings. I'm talking about the weak and the strong in the society, okay?
Historical materialism.
Okay, so how would you actually transfer this idea of evolution to social groups, to the society in the nation states and within the nation states and among the nation states? Let me tell you something. This idea actually became quite popular in the US, in almost every country in Europe at the time, in 1800s, after Herbert Spencer and others started thinking about it. So people start thinking, okay, with this same logic, if the weak does not survive, with this same logic, can we look inside the societies and see who is more likely to survive within the society? Okay? And we need to look at this from many perspectives. This is actually quite important of an ideology because this ideology was very popular in the world before First World War and before Second World War. There are still, if you Google this, you will see that there are still a lot of people who believe in subscribing the idea of social Darwinism. Yes?
Well, I think this idea was kind of around in some shape or form before Darwin, in the sense that, well, I think you can actually see traces of this, like, from all the Enlightenment thinkers, and even in particular, John Stuart Mill, who had some book where he was talking about the rule of law, its importance, all these things about what a state should be, and it's the highest form of a state, but then he still justifies slavery, and he says the same right, and he still justified colonialism, because he said that these people are not yet fit to rule, and maybe throughout history as they develop and they reach the same stage as Europe, then they will also have that privilege, but they're in a less developed and privileged stage.
Okay.
So I think, and that was in like 1850 or something, so it's been around, I think, post-Enlightenment, because people were trying to justify how the society should be in the way it was in the colonial structure, but still advocating all these kind of liberal democratic rights.
Absolutely. Let me ask you something. Remember I said the Portuguese were bringing Africans to Europe and the New World as slaves and selling them as slaves. But then I think I already mentioned to you that the Romans had slaves. Ottoman Empire had the idea of slaves. So the idea of slaves was around for such a long time, and philosophers have tried to explain, and sometimes people try to justify the idea of slavery, because I think deep in the conscience of human beings, you know, you feel that using someone else as a slave is not exactly fair to that person. But at the same time, for other reasons, such as economic reasons, you have slaves, you're using, or cultural reasons. In Rome, it was a cultural thing to have slaves. In the Ottoman Empire, in the palace, having the slaves was quite a pragmatic thing. It was quite a need in that sense. So that's how it was perceived. Now, from that perspective, guys, this idea of some people might be more superior to other people have been around for centuries, maybe thousands of years, okay? So the idea has been around, but as an ideology, see, that's the difference between an idea and an ideology. Once it was institutionalized under social Darwinism, once it became an organized idea and had subscribers from all over the world, it actually became natural to believe in social Darwinism. And in the extreme, social Darwinism became racism. And in the extreme, it became Nazism. And in the extreme, it went all the way to actually burning Jews in gas chambers, okay? So the idea evolved in a very long time, then it became an ideology, and after that, it actually was, installed, implemented by states, and then at some point, people decided that, or states decided that social Darwinism is not an ideology that we want in the world, which actually coincides with decolonization as well. Okay, so once social Darwinism lost its popularity, by the end of the Second World War, you actually have the idea of decolonization as well. So you start thinking that, well, if these people are not inferior, less strong than us, then maybe we should actually have. We should actually think that decolonization is not a very, very fair thing to do. I'm going to get back to this a little bit more after the midterm when we talk about imperialism, because we'll talk about imperialism as well. Okay? But now I want you to actually think about this. Okay, hold on. Yes, these are very difficult words. So I'm actually going to look at my notes to spell them. Yesness, okay. Temperance and frugality. I want you to learn these three. What do you think they are, other than being difficult vocabulary? Yes? Virtues. The traits that the society that should survive, that will survive, should have these three traits. Industriousness is being hardworking. Okay? So you should be hardworking as an individual and as a society. Temperance is moderation in action. Frugality is what? To spend in moderation, or to keep what you need for later. Okay. The opposite would be, yeah. So you hold on to what you need. Okay. Now, why would these three be virtues? You said virtues. Why are they virtues? What happens when you are industrious and you have temperance and frugality? You're going to get rich. So the natural consequence of having these virtues is to get rich. But that's not enough, because Jewish population in Germany at the time was rich. But still, from a social Darwinist perspective, Nazis believed that the Jews were in the bottom of the ladder. So it's not just being rich, but also, what? In order to, okay, oh, well, you have to be a good citizen. How do you become a good citizen? Pay your taxes. What else? Share with your people, with your society. Okay? So it is just the minority of the society with these traits, and they're keeping it all to themselves, then that is quite disturbing from a social Darwinist perspective. And if you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, that is exactly what he's thinking. Okay? So from that perspective, within the society, the rich will be superior, but it should, well, being rich is not enough, but at the same time, you should have a pure race that deserves to survive. So in time, social Darwinism becomes an ideology that compares races. Now, in the case of the Nazis, it even becomes as far to measure people's heads, you know, to look at the diameter of people's heads. There is a perfect skull in that sense. And what's that?
Turkish bone.
Well, from the Turkish social Darwinist perspective, yes, there's that, the Turkish bone, yeah, at the back of your head. And from the perspective of I'll tell you something interesting. In Rwanda, actually, from the perspective of the colonizers, there are two ethnicities, Tutsis and Hutus, and they actually, exactly, the colonizers actually measure the noses, how big the nose is, or how big the head is, or how wide the head is. And also the proportions of the eyes, you know, how far the eyes from one another. Those kinds of measurements, we think right now is quite, I don't know, what do you think, actually?
Absurd.
Absurd, right? That was the word I was about to use a minute ago. From my perspective, it's quite absurd to actually do that. But at the same time, in the 1800s, with the effect of influence of social Darwinism, it actually was quite normal to think that some races are different in a positive way, or some races are stronger than other races. Yes?
In Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Steel, and Guns, Germs, and Steel, there was written that exactly that some Western societies, some people from the Western societies cannot even deal with a simple job, which is of the Eastern societies, like hunting with bare hands or something.
Yes, so there was, because some nations were supposed to be more superior to others, there was a division of labor in that sense, and that's very much related to slavery. So what do the slaves do? What do the inferior ones do? They do only the worst jobs. There's actually caste system in India, and in that caste system there is a layer in the society, the untouchables. They call them untouchables. And these untouchables actually do only the worst manual jobs, such as cleaning the worse than the toilets, actually, the infrastructure. So I am not only talking about the Western, I don't want you to get this wrong. Social Darwinism is not peculiar to Western cultures. It's actually, like I said before, it's everywhere. Okay, to believe that some races are more superior, it's actually everywhere. Okay, and if I'm not wrong, I heard this from actually people who lived there. When there was the Japanese invasion of Korea, the Koreans actually felt that the Japanese were thinking the Koreans were were a lesser society in that sense. So, I mean, don't think of only the Western culture or Middle East or Indian. It's all over the world. I don't know if you want to connect this to human nature or whatever you want to connect this to. What we know for a fact is this idea of superiority between cultures, between societies, between races has been around for a long time. But what I'm saying is social Darwinism organized it in such a way through the works of philosophers, through the works of people like Sumner and Spencer. These guys actually made this advantage of some people or some societies over others, and they made it into an organized way of thinking of superiority. So guys, within the society then, there will be people that are more superior than others, so more fit to survive. And then between societies, so you transfer this idea of within the society superiority to between the societies superiority, which actually led to Nazism and to think that Slav race. Hitler believed that. The Slav race is not as superior as the Aryan race, okay? So from the perspective, well, this is actually quite interesting because, I don't know, I grew up thinking when I was younger and I was reading about Nazism and all, I kept thinking, and very naively, I kept thinking, but why? The Slavs are blonde, you know, blue eyes and the same physical characteristics with the Germans. So that was how I actually looked at the thing. I thought that the physical properties of the Slavs and Germans were not very different. But then as I read more, I learned that what the Nazis called the Aryan race is completely different. Their exact measurements, their exact virtues that the race is supposed to have.
Cultural
yes.
habits.
Absolutely. The cultural aspect of superiority is also a huge part of this discussion.
It's like a very hideous cultural critique, the Aryan race issue.
As I said, I want you to understand this, okay? At the time, whole nations believed in it. We can call it hideous now, but at the time, no one actually believed it was a bad idea.
Well, it was a perfect justification.
It was, well, I want you to think beyond that too. I want you to actually understand that people in their hearts sincerely believed that this distinction existed. Forget about justification, okay? I want you to forget about justification for a moment. It was very natural at the time, at the Roman times, it was very natural to actually throw people to lions, and it was very natural to have gladiators fight. It was very natural. That's how I want you to think, okay? So I think it's absurd that people are feeding lions with other people. I think it's absurd, but you have to understand the circumstances of that society of that time, okay? That is not an excuse, but I just want, in this course, I want you to actually understand the circumstances, and if you will criticize, do it after you understand the circumstances, okay? So one interesting thing is, how did Germany, you know, the nation, the people of Germany believe in this idea? If your state actually uses the ideology to educate you in that particular way, if the state actually doctrinates you in that way, of course you believe in that idea. It is not so absurd if you think of the nature of ideologies. Ideologies in the end become state tools for justification, for economic gains, for whatever, for a world empire, whatever reason. But if the state makes you believe in it through using education, since you are 4 years old, you'll believe it. You'll think that it's the most natural thing to believe that this part of the classroom should be sent to die because, sorry, you're not as fit to live as much as this part of the class. It sounds horrible, right, when I put it that way? is quite, you know, is quite horrible when I put it that way. But seriously, from a very ideology perspective, from a very absurd perspective we think of today, you know, I can actually, you know, come up with, if I'm the state, I can come up with reasons to show you why you all have to die because you're not superior. Okay? Please read Vanavera so that you will get more into this material. And then you're watching Platoon by next week. I don't have any other homework. That will be it. Thank you.